Hey, hi, how are you doing? My name is Comedy Corpse and welcome to a new video. And today it's a special video, I promise you. Today we are covering not just Magic the Gathering, but my favorite commander deck of all time. So sit back and enjoy the video. For this video I want to go over my very own Burakos Hunted 1 deck. It's a mono black aristocrat focused on recursion and value generation to take over the game. The deck is filled with wizards, rogue, warriors, and clerics to generate a ton of tempo and assemble the perfect party. It's quite simple, you'll see. It's not. Before I get into detail, I'll go over my commander pairing and why I choose them. This is also the part where I kinda go off script, so bear with me. Burakos, party leader, is 3 and a black for a 2/4 legendary orc with the following ability. Burakos party leader is also a cleric, a rogue, a warrior, and a wizard. Whenever Burakos attacks, defending player loses X life and you create X treasures, where X is the number of creature in your party, and choose a background. Haunted 1 is a legendary enchantment for 2 and a black for the following ability. Commander creatures you own have whenever this creature becomes tapped, it and other creatures you control that share a creature type with it each get +2/+0 and gain Undying on end of turn. If you don't know what Undying is, when a creature with Undying dies, if it had no +1/+1 counter on it, you return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a 1/1 counter on it. The main synergy is that Burakos has a line of text that makes him a warrior, a wizard, a rogue, and a cleric. Meaning, whenever I tap Burakos, each creature sharing one of these creature type will also get Undying. This allows you to sacrifice each of your creatures for free once to something like a national altar, or as an additional cost to cast a spell like Village Rites. But the better part of this is how you can double the ETBs and death triggers of your creatures like Direfleet Ravager and Body Launderer. This pairing is, for a lack of better words, hilarious. It's party, reanimator, tribal, and it's my glorious creation. I love it with all my heart. In this video, I'll go over my current deck list. I will also go over more budget-friendly options because not everyone to spend $30 on a Portal to Phyrexia or Phyrexian Altar. I have that in mind. I'll also go over some changes I did to the deck, like why I ended up swapping out Solemn Doom Guide, who's seemingly perfect for the deck, so stick around for that. And finally, I'll talk about the relevant stats of the deck, like the price and the number of party creatures we have in the list. With that being said, let's take a look at the list. The first thing we're going to talk about is the way you tap your commander without attacking. We have a few cards to do this. We have Old Out Settlements, Survivor's Encampment, we have Honorworn Shaku, and Relic of Legend from the top. The 2 land serves to tap Burakos only once per turn. It will give Undying and +2/+0 to all your creatures as long as you control your enchantment. The 2 artifacts, the Relic of Legend and Honorworn Shaku, are by far the strongest cards in the deck. These 2 artifacts allows you to tap Burakos at instant speed in response to a board wipe, or if you just want to block a really big creature and not lose any of yours, you can tap your commander, give everything +2/+0 and Undying, mass block a big creature, and get your board back. Honorworn Shaku specifically can tap your background to untap itself, meaning you often have 1 more mana than you think. A smart decision would be to add Moonsilver Key to the deck if you want to lean more into abusing the Undying mechanic, but I often feel like it's unnecessary, so I don't run it in my list. Something else I need to talk about is how you get rid of +1/+1 counters on your creatures, because whenever a creature with Undying dies for the first time, it comes back to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter, and getting rid of it is often how you can abuse the Undying trigger again and again. The few ways we can get rid of the counters on our creatures is with Yawgmoth, Trend Physician, Black Sun Zenith, and Retribution of the Ancient. Yawgmoth is a combo piece that you can't underestimate. Yawgmoth is 2 black for a human cleric with 2/4 stats. Protection from human. This is actually very important to keep in mind. There's a lot more humans in the game than you realize. You can pay 1 life, sacrifice a creature, put a -1 counter on up to 1 target creature, and draw a card. Very often you will sacrifice one of your creatures without a counter to remove a +1/+1 counter from another creature you control, and then sack that creature to remove the +1/+1 counter from the first creature you sack. This will create a loop if you can tap Burakos at instant speed. Being able to pay black and discard a card to proliferate is something you should always keep in mind. Proliferating counters on your own creatures is something you can do. You can power up your board this way. Or you can target opponent's creature with the --1 counter and proliferate. Yawgmoth is incredibly flexible in this deck, and if you would ask me what is the single most impactful card in the entire deck, I would tell you Yawgmoth without hesitation. If you have Yawgmoth, both your commanders in an Honor-Worn Sheku or Relic of Legend, you often have the game within your grasp. Black Sun Zenith, where X is equal to 1, will clear all your counters for only 3 mana, and shuffle itself back into your deck for later use. It can also wipe the board completely, leaving only your creature standing, effectively turning itself into a one-sided board wipe. Retribution of the Ancient is an enchantment for 1 black with the following ability. You can play black, remove X counters from among creatures you control. Target creature gets -X until end of turn. This lets us remove all the counters from our creatures for 1 black mana, which is a very, very good deal for us. This enchantment is extremely strong in this deck. If you have it early, do not play it. They will remove it. You really have to play it when you need it. Alright, so we talked about how to tap your commander, we talked about how to get rid of counters. Now let's take a look at the creatures that we're running. In the CMC1 slot, we're running Blood-Soaked Champion, Changeling Outcast, Disciple of the Vault, and Viscera Seer. Blood-Soaked Champion is 1 black for a 2/1 human warrior with Blood-Soaked Champion cannot block, and Raid. You can pay 1 and a black to return Blood-Soaked Champion from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only if you've attacked with a creature this turn. Changeling Outcast is 1 black for a 1/1 shapeshifter with Changeling, and Changeling Outcast can block and cannot be blocked. If you ever get to a point where you can tap Burakos indefinitely and give Changeling Outcast +2/+0 and Undying multiple times, you can turn Changeling Outcast into a one-shot. Have fun with that. Next up is Disciple of the Vault. It's 1 black for a 1/1 human cleric. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from play, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. Disciple of the Vault is here just to punish people who play a lot of treasures and people who play Imhotep. He's in there just for you, Isaac! Next up is Viscera Seer. Viscera Seer is 1 black for a 1/1 vampire wizard. Sacrifice a creature, scry 1. He's just a free sack outlet. That's it. For 1 mana. What else can you want? Moving on to 2 CMC creatures, we have Daffy Voidwalker. He costs black for a 3/2 Daffy Rogue with Shadow. If a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, instead exile it with a void counter on it. You can tap and sacrifice Daffy Voidwalker, and then choose an exiled card an opponent owns with a void counter on it, and you may play it this turn without paying its mana cost. If you don't want to spend $15 on a Daffy Voidwalker, you can change it for a Null Priest of Oblivion, or if you don't mind spending a bit more, you can replace it with Animate Dead. It does pretty much the same thing, but only for creatures. Next we have Malakir Blood Priest. 1 and a black for a 2/1 Vampire Cleric with, when Malakir Blood Priest enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures in your party. Sacrificing this guy twice will net you 8 life, while draining everybody for 8. But if you get to do this infinite amount of time, you kill the table for 2 mana. Very efficient. Next on our list, we have Reassembling Skeleton. 1 and a black for a 1/1 Skeleton Warrior, with you can pay 1 and a black, return Reassembling Skeleton from your graveyard to the battlefield tap. Just like Blood-Soaked Champion, this guy can recur himself over and over again. It's a really useful card in any sacrifice deck. If you don't have one, I recommend you get one. Next we have Shadowrite Priest. 1 and a black for a 2/2 human cleric. With other clerics you control get +1/+1. Then you can pay 3 black and sacrifice another cleric. Search your library for a black creature card. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. This ability is instant speed, fetches any of your best creatures, and can potentially win you the game on the spot if you get something like Yawgmoth Trend Physician, Marinette Master, Direfleet Ravager, or Grey Merchant of Asphodel. All I have to say is don't be afraid to sacrifice your commander if you're getting something better. You can always recast your commander or reanimate him, but this tutor is insane. The last creature we have in the 2 CMC slot is Tenacious Underdog. 1 and a black for a 3/2 human warrior with Blitz. Blitz is, if you cast this spell for its Blitz cost, it gains haste, and when this creature dies, draw a card. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. And Tenacious Underdog ability is you may cast him from the graveyard using its Blitz ability for 4 mana, 2 and 2 black. The interesting part about Blitz in this deck is because when you cast him from the graveyard with Blitz, you pay 4 mana, and then you attack with Burakos, the background, and Tenacious Underdog. He becomes a 5/2 with Undying. When he sacrifices himself at the beginning of the end step, he will come back to the battlefield and still draw you a card. Moving on to 3 CMC, the first creature we have is Demon's Disciple. 2 in a black for a 3/1 human cleric. When Demon Disciple enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Now I'm pretty sure I heard some of you cringe at the mere sight of this guy. But I'll be honest, there's 3 exactly like him that I could play in this deck. I chose 1. Alright, let's be serious. This guy in this deck is pretty good. If you give him Undying and sacrifice him to himself, you will get another trigger, sacrificing him again, or another one of your creatures if you want to. He's simply a very good removal. Next we have Reanimator Specs. 2 in a black for a 3/2 human wizard. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you draw a card. With how often you're going to be sacrificing your own creatures, you shouldn't be surprised if you draw from 10 to 20 cards with this. The next card on the list has a very similar purpose. It's Morbid Opportunist. 2 in a black for a 1/1 human rogue. Whenever one or more creature dies, draw a card. This ability only triggers once per turn. The main difference is that Reanimator Specs will only trigger from your creature dying, but Morbid Opportunist will be from any creature dying, but only once per turn. Next on the list is Tabarak's Ope's Demise, one of my favorite creatures of all time. It's 2 in a black for a 2/2 demon cleric with flying. Tabarak has lifelink as long as it has 5+1/+1 counter on it. And whenever another non-token creature you control dies, put a 1/1 counter on Tabarak. If that creature was a cleric, you may draw a card, and if you do, you lose 1 life. This card is a massive beater. It's a 7/7 flying lifelinker when it's online. And for every cleric that dies, including your commander, you will draw a card and lose 1 life. It's card advantage on a massive beat stick with lifelink that gains you life. There's nothing to not like about this creature. Last but not least, we have Varagov Bloodsky Sire. I didn't even know he was a rogue. It's a 2 in a black 2/3 demon rogue with Death Touch. It has Boast. Whenever it attacks, you can pay 1 in a black. Target player searches their library for a card, then shuffle their library and put that card on the top of it. It's basically a Vampiric Tutor with Death Touch. Simply a good card. Moving on to 4 CMC creatures, we have 12 of them. Yes, 12. This is the bulk of our deck. The first creatures we're going to talk about is Body Launderer. Body Launderer is 2 black for a 3/3 ogre rogue with Death Touch. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, Body Launderer connives. When Body Launderer dies, return another target non-rogue creature card with equal or lesser power from your graveyard to the battlefield. This guy can reanimate creatures you can't give Undying to, like Gary, Marionette Master, and the Merc with Bats. And just don't forget you can't reanimate your commander with this guy. You can't, he's a rogue. Next up on our list, we have Disciple of Bolas. 3 in a black for a 2/1 human wizard. When Disciple of Bolas enters the battlefield, sacrifice another creature. You gain X life and you draw X card, where X is that creature's power. Notably, when you tap Burakos, you give 2 power to all of your party types. Let's call it that. So not only do you get 2 extra cards whenever you play him, you will also get the creature back because of Undying. I usually draw from 5 to 6 cards with him, and sometimes you'll just win the game on the spot because you find your win cons, or you find the cards you need to win, like Yagmoth. Another good choice if you don't like the ETB sacrifice, you can play Shadowheart, but personally I like Disciple because you can abuse that ETB effect with the Undying of our commander. Next up we have a very weird card, but it's a pet card. It's a Gisa Glorious Resurrector. It's 2 black for a 4/4 human wizard. If a creature an opponent control would die, exile instead. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put all the creatures exiled with Gisa onto the battlefield under your control, they gain Decayed. With cards like Demon Disciple, Daffy Voidwalker, Tragic Slip, Prismary Eliminator, we have access to a ton of removal that we can use over and over again. Gisa will steal everything on the board very often. This is why I like this card. I also run stuff like Soul Shatter, Portal to Phyrexia in the deck. I can't think of a single time where Gisa did not pull her weight. Next, we have a very familiar face to a lot of players who play black. We have Gonti, Lord of Luxury. 2 black for 2/3 Everborn Rogue with Death Touch. When Gonti enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 card of target opponent's library, exile one of them face down, then put the rest at the bottom. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may look at and play that card. You may spend mana of any type to cast it. With the way Gonti is worded, basically you can play the cards even if Gonti is not on the battlefield, or if you reanimate him, or if you sack him and with Undying, and anyway. If you do this an infinite amount of time with the Yagmoth combo, or the next combo we'll talk about when we get to the enchantments, you can exile somebody's library and just win the game. So yes, Gonti is a win con if you can do a loop. Or if you can do this, let's say like 5 times, do it. Target the green player who has Heroic Intervention. Target the blue player who has counter spells. Target the player who gives you something that black cannot offer you. Next is Grim Hireling. 3 and a black for a 3/2 tiefling rogue. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create 2 treasures token. Then you can pay black, sacrifice X treasures, target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. You can only play this as a sorcery. Don't forget this, I always forget. If you start the game with a Changeling Outcast or Daffy Voidwalker that cannot be blocked, Grim Hireling is one of your best friends. It's not only that, but by design, because Burakos gives Undying to your creatures and more power, players won't block your 2 drops or 1 drops that has more power, because if they do, they either lose their creatures and you get yours back, or they simply take 3 damage to face and let you make treasures. So Grim Hireling in this deck, by design, is simply very, very strong. I feel like I say that about all the cards. Oh, they're very strong, they're very good. Yeah, because or else they wouldn't be in the deck. The next card is a card I can't believe is just 99 cents. It's the Mirkwood Bats. Mirkwood Bats are 3 and a black for a 2/3 bat. Whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. So whenever you make treasures with Burakos or Grim Hireling, you do 1 damage. Whenever you create a token, you do 1 damage. Whenever you sacrifice those tokens, you do another damage. And it's just 99 cents. Next, we have a card I never thought I would get to play ever. It's Prowling Geistcatcher. 3 and a black for 2/4 human rogue. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile it. If that creature was a token, you put a 1/1 counter on Prowling Geistcatcher. When Prowling Geistcatcher leaves the battlefield, return each card exiled with it to the battlefield under your control. At first I had my doubt about this, but the very first time I played it, I was able to win on the spot for 4 mana. The reason being, whenever you sacrifice another creature, you can exile it. So, you play Burakos, you have your enchantment, you tap Burakos, you give everything Undying, you sacrifice everything, they come back with a counter, you play Prowling Geistcatcher. Now the next time they die, they won't come back to Undying, but they will be exiled to Prowling Geistcatcher. Then you sacrifice Prowling Geistcatcher, every creature that's exiled will come back to the battlefield. What happened is that you didn't have to get rid of the counters to do your entire loop once again, allowing you to sacrifice all your creatures 4 times in total. Now this is a ton of value for 4 mana. This is a lot of value. Next is another familiar face to all black players, Rankle, Master of Pranks. Rankle is 2 black for a 3/3 fairy rogue with flying and haste. Whenever Rankle, Master of Pranks, deals combat damage to a player, choose any number. Each player discards a card, each player loses 1 life and draw a card, and each player sacrifices a creature. He does a bit of everything. He draws cards, he makes people sacrifice creatures, he lets me sacrifice my creatures, and he lets me discard cards that I want to reanimate. Simply good. Next on the list we have Ruthless Technomancer. 3 and a black for a 2/4 human wizard. When Ruthless Technomancer enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature you control. If you do, create a number of treasure token equal to the creature's power. You can also pay 2 and a black, sacrifice X artifacts. Return target creature card with power X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X cannot be 0. So not only is it a repeatable way to make treasures, you can also sacrifice your treasures to turn this card into a Reanimator. Next we have Vindictive Lich, 3 and a black for a 4/1 zombie wizard. When it dies, choose 1 or more modes, and each mode must target a different player. Target opponent sacrifices a creature, target opponent discards 2 cards, and target opponent loses 5 life. Being able to do this 2 times, 3 times, or even 4 times, you could be discarding entire hands, draining for 20 plus life, and sacrifice a whole board of creatures. It's also just a good threat to put on the table, like, oh, you want to attack me with your creature? Well, I'll discard your hand. Deal with it. Next, this is where I'd be talking about Yawgmoth, except we already talked about Yawgmoth. So instead, let's jump to the 5 CMC creatures. We have Direfleet Ravager. 3 black for 4/4 Orc Pirate Wizard, Menace Death Touch. When Direfleet Ravager enters the battlefield, each player loses a third of his or her life rounded up. This is a very strong effect, especially that we can do it 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. We can do this to the point where just Burakos attacking alone can kill a player. Next, we have the face of all mono black decks. We have Grey Merchant of Asphodel. He doesn't need any introduction. He probably killed each one of us at least once, but I guess I have to do it. 3 black for a 2/4 zombie. When Grey Merchant of Asphodel enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. A lot of creatures in this deck have 2 black pips in their mana cost, like Body Launderer, Gisa, Daffy Voidwalker, Gonti. Grey Merchant of Asphodel has 2 by himself. Marionette Master. We have a lot of devotion in the deck, so Grey Merchant of Asphodel fits right in. Next we have Primaris Eliminator, 4 and a black for a 3/2 Astartes Warrior. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature, or creatures target player controls get -2/-2 until end of turn. Paying 5 mana to destroy one creature is not a great deal, but having a repeatable removal, and especially one that can wipe an entire board if you do it 2 times or 3 times, it's a very good deal. The last creature in the 5 CMC slots is Puppeteer Click, 3 black for a 3/2 Fairy Wizard with flying. When it enters the battlefield, put target creature card from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste, and at the beginning of your next end step, exile it. It also has Persist. Persist is the opposite of Undying. When the creature dies, if it has no -1/-1 counter on it, it comes back to the battlefield. But the thing is, we give Undying, which puts a +1/+1 counter, which is different. At worst, Puppeteer Click is a Necromancy. It's gonna exile the creature at the end of turn, and you don't have to worry about it, or else you get some value out of it. But at best, it becomes a Rise of the Dark Realms, where you steal every creature from every graveyard, and you swing somebody. It also gains haste, so if you steal an Etali, you swing with Etali. If you steal a Dockside Extortionist, you get a ton of treasure. Finally, we're getting to our last 2 creatures. In this 6 CMC slot, we start with Marionette Master and All-Star. 4 black for a 1/3 Human Artificer with Fabricate 3. Whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master power. With treasures being a sub-theme in the deck because of Burakos, Grim Hireling, Ruthless Technomancer, Marionette Master is often able to close out games by itself. Finally, the last creature in the deck is Nadir, Agent of Descanel. She's 5 and a black for a 3/3 Elf Warrior. Whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, you put a 1/1 counter on it. And whenever she dies, you create a number of 1/1 green Elf Warrior creature token equal to its power. Of all the cards in the deck, I think this is the next one I'm going to cut. She's very slow. If I had to swap her out, I'll probably change her for either Feign the Broker or Axe Parasite. I'll put them on the screen, but I won't go too much into detail on them. Now that we're done with the creatures, we can finally get into the sorceries. I've already gone over Black Sun Zenith, so we'll go straight to Feed the Swarm. Feed the Swarm is 1 and a black for a sorcery, destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent control. You lose life equal to the permanent's converted mana cost. It's simply a good removal. It's very hard to efficiently get rid of enchantments in mono black, so I play this spell in every single deck that has black. It's simply that good. Next is Night Whisper, 1 and a black, you draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. Very efficient 2 mana for 2 cards. Next is a big one, Torment of Hellfire, X black sorcery. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discard a card. It's often used as a finisher, but if I had to be 100% honest, I would rather play a Exsanguinate. The reason why I play Torment of Hellfire came down to the people I play against. Also, I had a Torment of Hellfire just lying around, so I wanted to use it. The first and only sorcery in the 3 CMC slot is Victimize. 2 in the black, choose 2 target creature card in your graveyard, sacrifice a creature. If you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield tap. Not only is it a reanimate, but you can also sacrifice one of your creatures in the process, like Puppeteer Click, Disciple of Bolus, you get the idea. Next, the only sorcery we have in the 4 CMC slot is Dread Return. 2 black, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It also has Flashback, sacrifice 3 creatures. At worst, it's 4 mana, reanimate a creature. At best, it's sacrifice no creature because they come back to Undying, and reanimate a creature for free. In the 5 CMC slot, we have Coveted Prize. 4 and a black sorcery, the spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party. Search your library for a card, put it into your hand, and shuffle your library. If you have a full party, you may cast a spell with converted mana cost 4 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. I often use this just to get Yawgmoth. That's it. There's no other card in the deck I want more than Yawgmoth in my hands. And if you have Yawgmoth, just get something that taps your commander for free, like Honorworn Chaku and Relic of Legends. At 6 mana, the last sorcery you have is Toward the Grave. 4 black, the spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party. Return target creature card and up to 1 target cleric, rogue, warrior, or wizard card from the graveyard to the battlefield. If you have a full party, this is 2 mana, reanimate 2 creatures including a party. If you don't like how reliant it is on having a full party, you can just play something like Reanimate, Animate Dead, Necromancy. They just got reprinted in Murders at Call of Manor. If you prefer those ones, you can get them for pretty cheap right now. Alright, let's move on to instants. First up, we have Dark Ritual. Pay black, add black to your mana pool. Next up, we have Tragic Slip. Pay black, target creature gets -1 until end of turn. and it has Morbid. That creature gets -13/-13 until end of turn, instead if a creature died this turn. We'll be sacrificing a lot of creatures, so it's very easy to get Morbid and get through stuff like Indestructible. Next we have Village Rites. Pay black, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature and draw 2 cards. Don't forget that it's an additional cost to sacrifice a creature, so when you cast a spell, the creature is already gone, and if it has Undying, it's already on the stack. Going into 2 CMC, the only instant that we have is Deadly Dispute. 1 and a black, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw 2 cards, and create a treasure token. This has been a staple in every single black deck I've ever made. It has everything from drawing cards to creating treasures to sacrificing one of your creatures for free. Especially in a deck like this, sacrificing a creature as an additional cost is actually benefiting us rather than hindering us. Next, in the 3 CMC slot, we have Soul Shatter, a favorite of mine. 2 in a black for an instant. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest converted mana cost among creatures they control. It's another card that goes well with Gisa and Puppeteer Click. At its worst, you could be forcing opponents to sacrifice a mana dork, but at its best, opponents are forced to sacrifice their commander or one of their biggest threat. Hence why it's one of my favorite removal in mono black. In the 4 CMC slot, we have Deadly Rollick. It's 3 in a black. If you control a commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost, exile target creature. The card is currently $24, so if you don't want to pay the hefty price of $24, you can go with something like Eaten Alive, which I'm a big fan of. It's actually the card I ended up switching out for Deadly Rollick. I was simply lucky enough, for Valentine's Day, my sweet other half got me a foil Deadly Rollick, so I wanted to put it in my favorite deck of all time. Moving on to artifacts, finally. The first one we're going to talk about is Multi-Class Baldric. It's a 1 colorless artifact equipment. Equip creature has Lifelink if you control a cleric, Death Touch if you control a rogue, Haste if you control a warrior, and Flying if you control a wizard. As long as you have a full party, prevent all damage that would be dealt to equipped creature. And it has Equip 2. The funny thing is that one part of the text asks you, do you control one of these creature type, and the other one asks you, do you have a full party? The thing is, Burakos is not a full party, but he sure as hell is every single creature type dimension. So if you control Burakos, the equipped creature has all of these keywords. Next we have the meta defining Skull Clamp. Equipped creature has +1/-1. Whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards. Skull Clamp needs really no introduction. If you don't want to pay $13 for it, I do have a very fair replacement. It's called Transmogren's Crown. It's 2 colorless equipment. Equipped creature has +2/+0. Whenever equipped creature dies, draw a card. And it has equip for 2 or equip for black, which, since we play in a mono black, it fits very well. The +2 power is also very notable in this deck, because we do have some creatures that care about power. I think for a $12 difference, I think Transmogren's Crown is very reasonable. You know, if you don't draw 10 cards, you'll be drawing 5 cards, and 5 cards is very reasonable again. Next we have Soul Ring, 1 mana, tap for 2 mana. Everyone knows about this one, come on. Next one is Vat of Rebirth. Whenever another artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you put an oil counter. You can pay 2 in a black and tap, remove 4 oil counter from the Vat of Rebirth, and return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This deck is all about sacking your creatures, so you will never have a problem tapping this and paying 3. I think I'm starting to lose my voice, guys. The last artifact that we have in the 1 CMC slot is Wayfarer's Bauble. You can pay 2, tap, sacrifice the Bauble, and search your library for a basic land card. Put that card onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Going into 2 CMCs, we have Arcane Signet. You can tap, add 1 mana of any color, and your commander color. The next artifact is Jet Medallion. Black spells you cast, cost 1 less to cast. The card is currently $23, so if you don't want to spend $23 on it, you can buy either a Charcoal Diamond if you want to go really budget. If you're willing to pay a bit more, you can go for a Black Market. This is what I used to play before Jet Medallion. The way you should see this is that Jet Medallion is better in the early game, but Black Market gets more and more value the longer you play. Next on the list we have the Swiftfoot Boots and the Lightning Greaves. They earn their place in every single deck I've ever made. There's nothing like the protection they give, as cheap as they are. Right now Lightning Greaves are $8. If you don't want to spend $8, I'd suggest you try Whisper Silk Cloak. It allows Burakos to attack without getting blocked, and it also allows you to have some protection. Next, we're getting into the 3 CMC artifacts, and this is where a big problem comes, is that these artifacts are so mandatory for the deck. First, we're going to talk about the altars. Ashnod Altar, Phyrexian Altar, both allows you to sacrifice a creature at instant speed to add some mana to your mana pool. Ashen Altar is 2 colorless, 2 mana pool, and Phyrexian Altar is 1 mana of any color. Ashen Altar, I can't really give any substitute for it. There's no substitute for Ashen Altar. And the same thing for Phyrexian Altar. There's no other artifacts or no other card that does similar things. Phyrexian Altar, maybe you could play a Pitiless Plunderer, but the problem is that you don't have that instant speed sacrifice a creature. And there's not many creatures that would fit the deck where you can sacrifice creature at instant speed. That is the major problem of these artifacts in particular. You really need the altar or something that does the same thing as them. I can give you a budget option for pretty much every other card in the deck, but the thing is, these are like Yawgmoth. You can't really play the deck without Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth is that impactful to the deck. It changes everything. Next, I would talk about Honor Worn Shaku and Relic of Legends, but we've already covered it, so let's go to the 4 CMC artifacts. And the only card we have is Mask with Nexus. A lot of you probably know about this card. Creatures you control are every creature type. The same is true for creature spell you control and creatures cards you own that are on the battlefield. Basically, creatures in your deck are every single type. Creatures you have on the stack are every single type. Creatures in your graveyard are every single type. And you can also pay 3, tap, create a 2/2 blue shapeshifter. The only thing you have to worry about when playing Mask with Nexus is Body Launderer, because Body Launderer asks you specifically that you target a non-rogue creature in your graveyard when you try to reanimate it. So that's the only thing you have to worry about, but beside that, it makes all your creatures changelings. Now going straight into 9 mana CMC artifacts, we have Portal to Phyrexia. Portal to Phyrexia is 9 colorless. When Portal to Phyrexia enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. At the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexian in addition to its other type. So why is it in the deck, Comedy? I'll be honest, it's very slow. I played it twice in the 20-something games that I played. The thing is, it's not the best artifact by far. I played because 9 mana is something that's very easy to achieve in this deck, mostly because of Burakos. But more importantly, sacrifice 3 creatures all around the table, plus a reanimate at every upkeep is something that's very, very powerful as an effect. But the card right now is $28, so I got a few options for you. If you want to pay a third of the price, Sheoldred Whispering 1 is currently $10. It has Swamp Walk. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, they sacrifice a creature. This is about the same effect, but I guess easier to remove because it's a creature. But if you don't want to spend $10 for it, there's a lot of budget options. Butcher of Malakir is a good one. Or if you care about the reanimation, you can play Living Death. Finally, moving on to enchantments, we have Retribution of the Ancient, which we already talked about, so let's move on to mana 2. We have the famous Bitter Blossom. 1 out of black for Tribal Enchantment Fairy. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and put a 1/1 Black Fairy Rogue with flying onto the battlefield. Currently the card is $21, so if you don't want to spend $21, again I have some options for you. Preacher of the Schism is a pretty decent one. It creates tokens as well and draws you cards. Another one I thought about when making the deck was the Mardu Strike Leader. It's 2 in a black for a 3/2 human warrior. Whenever Mardu Strike Leader attacks, you create a 2/1 black warrior creature token. The thing is, Bitter Blossom, there's nothing quite like it again. It is such a strong enchantment in this deck. It makes you a rogue every upkeep. But Mardu Strike Leader is probably the closest thing I can think of. If you don't want to spend $20, there's a 26-cent version of it. At 3 mana, we have Black Market Connection. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, choose 1 or more, create a treasure token. Draw a card, you lose 2 life. Create a 3/2 colorless shapeshifter, and you lose 3 life. The thing is, there's nothing quite like this card, but if you want a shapeshifter, you can always go for a Graveshifter or Universal Automaton. I think those are the best replacement for this, because I mainly use it for the shapeshifter. Next, we have Phyrexian Arena. 1 black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Phyrexian Arena is another one of those mono black staple. For 3 mana, you essentially draw 2 cards per turn and lose 1 life. And finally, after hours of editing, we have the final non-land permanent of the deck. It is Dictate of Erebos. 3 black. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature, and it has flash. Dictate of Erebos is currently $16. It is a very strong card, but if you don't want to spend $15 on it, there is Butcher of Malakir that does the exact same thing. The main argument people have against Butcher of Malakir is that it's 7 mana instead of 5, but I say that for a 5/4 Vampire Warrior that fits in the deck with flying, and when you attack with Burakos it becomes a 7/4 in the air, it is very much worth it. Not only that, but it's very easy in this deck to get 7 mana, because of all the treasures you make with Burakos. Moving on to the lands, we have 34 lands in total, and we're gonna start with High Market and Hostile Host. These two have only one purpose in the deck, and it's to sacrifice your creatures when you don't have access to your altars, Viscera Seer, or Yawgmoth. Next we have Survivor's Encampment and Old Out Settlement. We already went over those. Their main purpose is to tap your commander at instant speed and give Undying to all of your creatures. Next up we have Witch Cottage. Witch Cottage enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 3 or more other swamps. When Witch Cottage enters the battlefield, on tap, you may put a target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. Next up we have the famous Bojuka Bog. It enters tapped. When Bojuka Bog enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target player's graveyard, and you can tap to add black. This is another one of Mono Black staple, and a card you should run in every single black deck. It is simply that good. It is Graveyard Hate on the land, and it's never a bad choice. The last 3 non-basic of the deck is going to be Myriad Landscape, Path of Ancestry, and the Temple of the False God. And before somebody asks, yes, Path of Ancestry will work for every single one of the party types: Warrior, Cleric, Wizard, and Rogue. I gotta check multiple times, you don't have to go online. And we're gonna finish the deck with 25 swamps. That is it, guys. That is the entire deck list. That is my current deck list. This is exactly what I play right now. With the deck list out of the way, I want to take maybe 5 minutes just to talk about some noticeable cards I decided to switch out of the deck. The first one is going to be Solemn Doom Guide. Solemn Doom Guide lets you unearth creatures for very cheap. The main problem I have with Solemn Doom Guide is that it exiles your creatures at the end step or when they die, so you can't use them to sacrifice and do your loop again. That's why I took him out of the deck. Next is Mikaeus, the Unhallowed. Mikaeus is often regarded as one of the best protection in Mono Black because of the Undying it provides, but the thing is, a lot of our creatures, including the shapeshifters in the deck, are humans. So we can't use Mikaeus to its full potential. Maybe we can use it for Burakos, but for the very few creatures that we can actually use Mikaeus for, I don't think it's worth a slot in the deck. Next, we have a controversial one, at least for me. Revel in Riches. Whenever a creature an opponent control dies, you create a treasure token, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. Personally, I don't like these kind of win cons unless I have to really work for it. It's a very strong card that I often debate to put back in the deck, but Exodia win cons always left a bad taste in my mouth whenever I play them. And the last card I want to talk about is the Cauldron of Souls. Cauldron of Souls is a 5-mana artifact that gives persist to any number of creature until end of turn. The reason I took it out of the deck is Prowling Guy's Catcher. Prowling Guy's Catcher in comparison is so out of this world that even giving persist to your creatures instead of Undying is just not worth it. Prowling Guy's Catcher is 10 times better. Now that we're reaching the end of the video, I will display on the screen the stats of the deck and the price. And of course, I'd like to thank you, the viewer, for watching this video. This took quite a long time to make, so leave a like, leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of the editing, let me know what you thought of the video. I think for my first big project on YouTube, I think I did pretty well. I'm proud of this video. And since you made it this far, maybe subscribe and ring the bell. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao.